So for the past few weeks, you have been learning about velocity. You've learned how to create velocity versus time graphs from looking at position versus time graphs. You've learned how to analyze velocity versus time graphs, and you've learned the equations for velocity and how to read word problems and solve them using the velocity equation. Today, we're going to go over how to find displacement by looking at a velocity versus time graph. So if we look at this graph on the left-hand side, velocity is on the y-axis and time is on the x-axis. And we can get different types of information from looking at this graph. One of which is we can find out displacement. So first, let's review our equation for velocity. If you can remember, velocity is equal to the change in position over the change in time. Remember, change in position is the displacement, the final position minus the initial position. If we look at our graph here on the left-hand side, we're given two of the variables in this equation. We're given velocity and we're given time. Velocity is 4 meters per second and the time was 15 seconds. So this object moved at a constant velocity of 4 meters per second over a time period of 15 seconds. Let's use the traditional method that we learned, this equation here on the top, to solve for the change in position, to solve for displacement. Okay, so we have velocity, which is 4 meters per second. We're going to solve for x, we're going to solve for our change in position or our displacement, divided by our change in time, which was 15 seconds. If we plug in our values, displacement is equal to 4 times 15, and we can find out that displacement was 60 meters. So the displacement of this object was 60 meters. But there's a more simple way that we can find displacement by looking at a velocity versus time graph. We can also get displacement by finding the area under a velocity versus time graph. So if we look at this graph and we look at our velocity line, the area under that line forms the shape of a rectangle. In order to solve for this, you need to know the equation on how to solve for the area of a rectangle. The area of a rectangle is equal to the base times the height. So if we look at our graph, the base would be from 0 to 15, and the height would be from 0 to 4. So the base is 15 and the height is 4. We can take these values and plug it into the equation for the area of a rectangle. So again, area is equal to base times height. So area is equal to 15 seconds times 4 meters per second. Area is equal to 60 meters. We got the same exact answer that we got for plugging in the values into our velocity equation, but we got it a different way from solving for area. So it was a little bit more simple. If we look at the middle graph here, we can see that this object moves at an increasing velocity over a time period of 15 seconds. And I want to find out what the total displacement of this object was. Again, to do this, I just solve for the area under the graph. The area under this line forms the shape of a triangle. So to solve for area, I need to know the equation to solve for the area of a triangle, which is 1/2 times the base times the height. And these equations will be given to you guys during your AP exam. So if I look at my graph, the base is 15, the height is 6, and so I just plug it into the equation. Area is equal to 1/2 times 15 seconds times 6 meters per second, and that gives me a displacement of 45 meters. So this object had a displacement of 45 meters. Again, just another easier way to solve for displacement by doing the area under the line. Now it's your turn to try it. If you guys look at this graph right here, I want you to find the total displacement of this object. Again, using the formulas for the area between the graph. This object moved at an increasing velocity for 4 seconds. And then for 6 seconds, had a constant velocity of 8 meters per second. And go ahead and solve for displacement. We can see it forms two shapes. It forms a triangle here, and it forms a rectangle here. So solve for the displacement and show me your answer.